Shavua Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bikkurim. We're up to Perek Bet Mishnah Daled. Today's Mishnah should be Leilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbai ben Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. Like the previous Mishnah, this Mishnah also contrasts Tiruman Maaser Sheni with Bikkurim. V'yesh b'bikurim ma she'en ken b'truma of maaser. There are laws that apply to bikurim but not to tiruma and maaser sheni. Sha'bikurim niknin b'mchubar lekarka. Bikurim can be designated while the produce is still attached to the ground. Now we know niknin literally acquired, meaning the fruits acquire the sanctity of bikurim, like we will learn later on in chapter 3, Mishnah 1. The ideal procedure is that when a farmer sees fruits beginning to ripen on a tree or the ground, he designates them as bikurim. A person can designate all the produce of his field as bikurim without leaving any for himself. And he is responsible for them, meaning if one's bikurim are lost or ruined before he brings them to the temple, he must replace them with others, like we learned earlier in chapter 1, Mishnayot 8 and 9. Ut'unim korban, and they require an offering, meaning one who brings bikurim to the temple must bring an offering as well. He must bring a shelamim offering before leaving Yerushalayim. However, if he does not bring this offering, he still fulfills the mitzvah bikurim, as the Rambam tells us in Echot Bikurim, chapter 3, Halacha 12. Vishir, and they require song, meaning the Levim sing when bikurim are brought into the temple. We'll see that later in chapter 3, Mishnah 4. Utnufa, they require waving, meaning the owner of the bikurim and a kohen holding the bikurim together. The owner of the bikurim and a kohen hold the bikurim together and wave them in all directions, meaning they move the basket containing the bikurim in each of the 4 directions of the compass and up and down. Gemara Mesechet Menachot, page 62a. We'll see later in the Mishnah, chapter 3, Mishnah 6. Vilina, and they require staying overnight, meaning when someone brings bikurim to the temple, he may not leave Yerushalayim before the morning, but must spend the night in the city. In fact, the requirement of lina, staying overnight, applies whenever someone brings an offering to the Bet Mikdash, not only bikurim. Now, these laws do not apply to tiruma or maaser sheni. For tiruma and maaser sheni can be separated only from produce that has been picked. One cannot leave his whole crop one cannot make his whole crop into tiruma or maaser sheni, but must leave some as regular produce. Also, maaser sheni cannot be more than 1/10 of the crop. Gemara Mesechet Menachot, page 54b. And if tiruma or maaser sheni is lost or ruined, it doesn't have to be replaced. Now, the remaining laws of offering, song, waving, and staying in Yerushalayim overnight, which are related to the temple and its offerings, also have no relevance to tiruma and maaser sheni. And that is on the Botai of Mishnah Daled. Mishnah Hey now deals with tirumat maaser, which has not been mentioned so far in the chapter. When maaser rishon is separated from the produce and given to a Levi, the Levi separates 1/10 of it and gives that 10 to a Kohen. This portion is called tirumat maaser. The Mishnah compares tirumat maaser to bikurim and tiruma. Tirumat maaser shava lebikurim b'shtei drachim. Tirumat maaser is similar to bikurim in 2 ways. V'litruma b'shtei drachim, and similar to tiruma in 2 ways. Nitelet min hatorah latameh. Tirumat maaser may be separated from tahor produce on behalf of tameh produce, meaning if someone has both tameh and tahor produce, he is forbidden to separate tiruma from the tahor produce for the sake of the tameh produce, even though the tahor produce is superior. That's because of the law of proximity, mina mukaf, which states that when tiruma is designated, it must be touching or near the produce for which is being designated. The sages were concerned that someone who separates tiruma from tahor produce for the sake of tameh produce might be afraid to put the piles of produce near each other for fear that tameh produce will touch tahor produce, making it tameh. Therefore, the sages decreed that tiruma may never be separated from tahor produce on behalf of tameh produce. But this rabbinic decree is relevant only to tiruma, not to tirumat maaser, because the law of mina mukaf, the law of proximity, applies only to tiruma, like the Mishnah teaches. Therefore, it's permitted to separate tirumat maaser from maaser rishon that's tahor, for the sake of maaser rishon that is tameh. V'shelo mina mukaf, it may be separated from produce that is not near the produce for which is being separated. Bikurim, in these 2 ways, the tirumat maaser is like bikurim, because the law of proximity does not apply to bikurim, like it's clear from the fact that the fruit of one tree can be designated as bikurim on behalf of the fruit of the other tree, even though the 2 groups of fruit are next to each other. And since bikurim are not subject to the laws of mina mukaf, the law of proximity, there's no reason to forbid designating tahor produce as bikurim for the sake of tameh produce. However, tirumat maaser forbids produce that has been processed, meaning once produce is processed, eating it is forbidden until terumat maaser has been designated, meaning once the farmer has finished processing his produce, it may not be eaten even as a snack until he designates its teruma, maaser rishon, and maaser sheni / ani. Although the remaining produce is permitted to be eaten, the maaser rishon itself is forbidden because it contains terumat maaser. Even after being given to a Levi, the maaser rishon remains forbidden until he separates terumat maaser from it. V'yesh las shiur, and it has a specific amount, 1/10. Terumat maaser must be 1/10 of the maaser rishon. Kitruma, in these two ways, terumat maaser is like teruma, because we know processed produce may not be eaten at all until teruma and the other required portions have been separated from it. Teruma must be a specific amount, usually 1/50th of the crop. Bikkurim are different in both respects, because processed produce may be eaten before bikkurim have been separated from it, provided the other portions have already been separated. Also, bikkurim can be any amount. And that is Rabbotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody Shavua Tov. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.